Disclaimer: this video contains discussions of real criminal cases and sensitive subject matter. It is created for educational and documentary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. A shopping list folded twice, a half-charged phone left on a kitchen counter, a crumpled receipt, time-stamped 6:42 p.m., the ink already fading. He promised to be back before the ice cream melted. He pulled the side door shut, let the lock catch, and stepped into a quiet evening that seemed to carry him forward like a current. When his cart cleared the store's final aisle, a storm front rolled in, unseen, silent, and human. There are stories where endings arrive with sirens and tape and courtroom vows. This isn't that story. This is the empty space, shaped like a father, a partner, a friend, where an ending should be. He walked out the front door with a short list and a quiet purpose: milk, bread, a frozen dinner or two. Nothing strange, nothing worth remembering. Yet hours later, his car sat abandoned hundreds of miles away, its engine cold, his wallet and phone untouched, his life erased like chalk in the rain. In December 2009, 30-year-old Steven Koecher, a mild-mannered journalist from Utah, left his apartment to run what should have been an ordinary errand. He told no one where he was going, carried no luggage, and made no phone calls. He simply vanished, leaving behind a trail that felt less like evidence and more like echoes. Home surveillance caught him parking his white Chevy Cavalier in a quiet Las Vegas neighborhood. He steps out calmly, wearing jeans, a jacket, and sunglasses. He looks around, purposeful, but never returns. In that moment, he becomes both a man walking to his fate and a mystery that still defies explanation. This is the story of a disappearance so ordinary, it became terrifying, the kind of case that reminds us how easily a person can walk into the open air and never come back. He was responsible, soft-spoken, deeply religious, the kind of man people described as steady. Steven had moved from Utah to St. George to work in advertising, chasing opportunity but struggling to make ends meet during the recession. He lived alone, attended church, called his parents weekly, and kept his routine simple. That December, he was reportedly looking for freelance work. He mentioned nothing unusual, nothing troubling. But over the next few days, Steven's movements would become inexplicably erratic, the kind of behavior that would baffle even veteran detectives. On December 12th, he drove to Las Vegas. His phone pinged along the way, following a direct route through the desert. Surveillance later captured him entering a Henderson neighborhood not his, not a friend's, not anyone's that he knew. He parks near a cul-de-sac, gets out, walks across the street, and disappears around a corner. His car remains where he left it, as if waiting for him to return from something quick. But he never does. For 2 days, neighbors noticed the car sitting unmoved. On December 14th, police ran the plates. Inside were his clothes, Christmas gifts for his family, even his laptop untouched. The gas tank was half full. The car was in working order. It was as if he had stepped out for a moment and dissolved into thin air. Theories exploded. Some believed he had a secret reason to be there, a meeting, a friend, a relationship no one knew about. Others thought he'd stumbled into danger. A few suggested he might have chosen to vanish, escaping debt or despair. But those who knew Steven rejected that completely. He was close to his family. He'd planned to visit them for Christmas. His bank account showed no strange activity, and his faith was his anchor, not the kind that unravels into running away. Searches covered desert miles, drones, cadaver dogs, helicopters, all combing through the edges of Las Vegas and beyond. Nothing, not a shoe, not a phone, not a trace of struggle. It was as though the earth had swallowed him, and then came the strange detail. Days before his disappearance, Steven had driven long distances to towns hours away with no clear reason. Phone records showed him traveling to remote areas near Mesquite and even into Nevada earlier that week. He never explained it to anyone. No friends, no co-workers, no family, just miles of road, long silences, and dead signal. Investigators examined everything: his church ties, his finances, his computer. No hint of crime, no digital clue, no good. By note. The last signal from his phone was a ping from a tower near that Henderson neighborhood minutes after he parked. Then silence. Some thought maybe he met someone there. Others believed he was lured. There were whispers of a second vehicle seen nearby, an unknown figure walking close to the same area around the same time. But nothing solid enough to build on. Years passed. His parents refused to give up. They distributed flyers, appeared on talk shows, organized vigils. His mother, Rolf, said she still set a place for him at Christmas, hoping one day the chair wouldn't stay empty. To this day, no evidence of Steven Koecher's fate has ever surfaced. No body, no suspect, no confession. But the strange calm of his final moments, his deliberate walk, his composed posture, his unhurried stride haunts anyone who watches that security footage. It's not the walk of panic or confusion. It's the walk of someone who believed he knew exactly where he was going, and that is what makes it chilling. Because if Steven was meeting someone, they never came forward. If he was running from something, he left everything behind. And if he simply got lost, it was in a place small enough for neighbors to hear a cough through a window, yet no one heard a sound. When a person disappears, the world keeps its secrets cruelly well. The house lights stay on, the groceries go bad, and the voicemail fills with unanswered rings. Life continues around the silence, pretending not to notice that someone has fallen through it. For the Koecher family, the mystery is not just about a man lost in the desert. It's about faith stretched to its limits and hope refusing to die even when logic says it should. More than a decade later, Steven's case remains open, an ache disguised as a question. He left home for groceries. He should have been back within an hour. Instead, his car sat waiting in a city where he knew no one. And maybe somewhere between those 2 points between home and the horizon, something unspeakable happened. Something that turned an ordinary errand into an unsolved disappearance that still chills investigators to this day. To the Koecher family, and to every family still searching, your fight for answers matters. You remind us that even when the trail grows cold, love refuses to. If you know anything about the disappearance of Steven Koecher, contact the Henderson Police Department or the National Missing Persons Hotline. Because no one should vanish between home and the grocery store, not then, not ever. The discovery of Steven Koecher's abandoned car in a quiet Henderson neighborhood was only the beginning of what would become one of the most haunting and perplexing disappearances in recent American history. Police quickly realized this was no ordinary missing person case. Nothing about it made sense. His wall, it was still there. His Christmas gifts, unwrapped and labeled, were neatly stacked on the passenger seat. His phone charger dangled from the dash, still plugged in. Everything pointed to a man who intended to return. Everything, except Steven himself. The deeper investigators dug, the more disjointed the days leading up to December 13th became. On December 10th, just 3 days before vanishing, Steven drove nearly 200 miles north to Salt Lake City, a spontaneous trip that puzzled his family. He stayed overnight, then drove back to St. George the next day without telling anyone why he went. Then, less than 48 hours later, he was on the road again, this time headed south toward Las Vegas. His phone records placed him in several small Nevada towns that Saturday morning. He stopped briefly at a gas station in Mesquite, then again in the suburbs outside Las Vegas, though no one remembered interacting with him. To law enforcement, it looked like Steven was driving aimlessly, crossing state lines, stopping briefly and moving on again, but the pattern didn't feel random. It felt deliberate, as if he was following an invisible plan. By 11:00 a.m., that Sunday, December 13th, he was in Henderson. He parked his white Chevy on Savannah Springs Avenue and walked away, and that's where the evidence ends. Detectives canvassed the entire area, a calm subdivision surrounded by tidy lawns, quiet driveways, and security cameras that watched without understanding. Footage from one house captured Steven walking briskly down the sidewalk. He's dressed casually, wearing a white shirt, dark pants, and carrying something small in his hand, possibly a folder or a piece of paper. He walks past the camera, glances briefly toward the road, and disappears from view. There was no sign of distress. No one followed him, no one approached him, and yet, from that moment forward, he was gone. Residents didn't recognize him. None reported hearing a disturbance or seeing anything suspicious. The area was safe, even dull. The kind of place where neighbors left garage doors open during the day and kids rode bikes in circles. That calm only made the mystery deeper. Why would Steven park there? Why walk into that neighborhood when he knew no one who lived there? And what was he doing with papers in his hand? Police would later learn that he'd printed dozens of resumes in the weeks before disappearing, trying to find steady work. Some speculated he may have been handing them out door to door or attending a job lead that went wrong, but no local businesses had any record of contact from him. No one had seen him ask for directions or hand out documents that day. If Steven had an appointment, it left no trace. Authorities launched ground searches across the surrounding desert. Volunteers, helicopters, dogs all combing through brush and canyons. But Nevada is vast, and silence spreads quickly there. The desert doesn't give up secrets easily. Steven's parents drove from Utah to Las Vegas immediately. They retraced his steps, visited the grocery stores, the gas stations, even the church buildings he might have stopped at. They stood outside the cul-de-sac where his car was found and stared down the street he had walked, hoping for something, a feeling, a clue, a sense of direction, but the air was still. The Koechers went door to door themselves, pleading for information. One elderly couple recalled seeing a man matching Steven's description, walking toward the park that morning confident, as if he knew where he was going. Another neighbor mentioned a small white pickup truck parked briefly near the same area. Police looked into it but could never verify the connection. Each lead evaporated almost as quickly as it appeared. With no body, no witness, and no evidence of foul play, theories became the only tools investigators had left. Some believed Steven had chosen to start a new life. Maybe the financial stress had become too much. Maybe he wanted to escape the mounting bills and job uncertainty, but those who knew him rejected this instantly. He was close to his church, close to his family. He had plans for the future. His car contained Christmas presents he had personally picked for his loved ones, a man preparing for a holiday, not a disappearance. There was no note, no history of depression, no final calls, no confessions, no trace of that kind of intent. The only thing missing was him. This theory grew darker with time. Henderson police believed he might have encountered someone that day, someone who promised work, or asked for help, or lured him with purpose. The area where his car was found wasn't far from open desert trails and isolated spaces. It was the kind of place where something could happen quietly, in minutes, without witnesses. Some investigators began to suspect that he may have met with foul play after a misunderstanding or ambush, something unplanned but final. But without evidence, even this theory was only air. For Steven's parents, Rolf and Deanne Koecher, the years that followed were a slow-motion nightmare. Every holiday arrived with an empty chair. Every lead turned to dust. They worked with private investigators, distributed flyers in 3 states, and kept his face alive in national missing person databases. They appeared on Disappeared, the investigation discovery series, hoping public exposure might jog a memory or stir a conscience. But nothing. In one heartbreaking interview, Deanne said, "Every morning we wake up and hope today will be the day, but then night comes and it isn't." Her words became a mantra for countless families living inside the same unanswered question: where did he go? Nearly 15 years have passed since that December afternoon. No trace of Steven Koecher has ever been found, no remains, no confessions, no closure. The surveillance video of him walking across the street remains the final known moment of his life, a man stepping out of frame, leaving behind a riddle no one can solve. Every investigator who's worked the case agrees on one thing: whatever happened to Steven, it happened fast, within minutes of him parking that car. He left behind groceries in the fridge, laundry folded, bills ready to pay, and a church bulletin on the counter for the following Sunday. He wasn't running from life, he was living it, and then he was gone. For the family of Steven Koecher, every year that passes is another reminder that some mysteries refuse to fade, but neither does hope. If you or anyone you know remembers anything from December 2009, anything connected to Steven's white Chevy Cavalier or the Savannah Springs neighborhood in Henderson, Nevada, please come forward. Sometimes justice begins with a memory. Sometimes peace begins with a single truth. He left home for groceries and was never seen again. But somewhere out there, the truth about what happened to Steven Koecher still waits to be found. By the time the first week of the investigation ended, police in Henderson ensign George realized that Steven Koecher's case was unlike any other disappearance they had handled before. Nothing about it fit the mold. It wasn't a story of a drifter, a runaway, or a man leading a secret life. This was a man who simply vanished, and yet, as the days turned into weeks, subtle fragments began to surface, fragments that hinted at something more complicated than anyone first imagined. One of the few clues investigators had was Steven's cell phone activity. Records showed that his phone had made its last ping near the Anthem neighborhood, a quiet, upscale part of Henderson, Nevada, at around 11:54 a.m. on December 13, 2009, roughly 40 minutes after surveillance captured him walking down the street. That was it. The signal went dead. No further calls, no texts, no app activity, nothing. The phone's battery didn't just die, it stopped transmitting. To investigators, that suggested it had been either destroyed, turned off deliberately, or taken somewhere outside of service range, a rare and troubling sign in a suburban area where coverage was strong. Even stranger, his phone's GPS logs revealed that Steven had made several strange, unexplained trips in the days before his disappearance, some to remote desert locations, others across state lines. He wasn't telling anyone where he was going. He wasn't leaving messages, but he was moving. His parents, Rolf and Deanne, later said that they believed Steven was searching for work opportunities, or maybe helping someone through his church, as he often did. He had always been generous with his time, often volunteering to help people move, find housing, or organize charity drives. But without him here to explain, those trips took on an eerie new meaning. Why was he driving long distances? Who was he meeting? And was someone using his faith and kindness to lure him into danger? As a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Stephen's life revolved around service and community. He attended regularly, often doing outreach in nearby towns. Investigators soon wondered whether his disappearance might be connected to his church activity. Maybe he was on a trip to help someone or deliver something. But his congregation couldn't confirm any assignment that weekend. There were no records, no scheduled missions, no service calls. So if Stephen had driven to Henderson for a religious reason, it wasn't official. That raised another question. Had someone pretended to be part of his church community to gain his trust? It wouldn't be the first time such manipulation had happened in missing person cases when victims are tricked into meeting someone under the guise of faith or goodwill. But still, there was no trace of communication, no emails, no texts, no notes connecting Stephen to any meeting or person, only movement and then silence. Detectives meticulously processed the Chevy Cavalier. Inside the car, everything was neat, too neat. His clothes were folded. His iPod was placed in the center console. The gifts for his family were still in their shopping bags. But there was something off. The driver's seat was pulled slightly back, not his usual position, according to his father. The car keys were found inside, suggesting he hadn't locked it himself, or that someone else had returned to the car later. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken glass, no damage. But the car's tires showed dust and sand consistent with travel on back roads, not just the paved streets of Henderson. Had Stephen met someone and followed them off the main road before returning? Or had someone else driven the car back to the cul-de-sac to make it look like he had parked it there himself? These were the questions investigators couldn't answer. In the early months, sightings of Stephen came pouring in dozens from across the Southwest. A man resembling him was spotted at a gas station in Ely, Nevada. Another reported sighting placed him in Albuquerque, New Mexico. A third came from Sacramento, California. Each time, detectives chased the lead. Each time it was a dead end. They even received reports of possible hitchhikers matching Stephen's description: quiet, polite, well-dressed, walking along desert highways, but none of those reports were ever confirmed. In time, the lead stopped, and the Koecher family was left with the one thing worse than bad news: no news at all. Then came an eerie coincidence, one that made national headlines. Just 2 weeks after Stephen disappeared, another man, Susan Powell's husband, Josh Powell, also from Utah, became the focus of a missing person case when Susan vanished from her home under suspicious circumstances. The two cases had no direct connection, but both involved young men from Utah, both active in the same faith community, both vanishing under mysterious circumstances in December of 2009. Some speculated there was a link. Perhaps Stephen had stumbled upon something or someone connected to a larger criminal network. Others dismissed it as coincidence. Still, the overlap of timing and geography was too strange to ignore. For investigators, it was another angle to examine. For the Koechers, it was another wound in a month already heavy with grief. Years went by. New detectives inherited the case, each bringing fresh eyes and fresh hope. They reanalyzed phone data, ran digital reconstructions, even used newer mapping software to simulate his travel route. But nothing new ever emerged. The footage of Stephen walking down the street in Henderson remains the last confirmed moment of his life, frozen in time, like a man walking into an unfinished sentence. In that short clip, he doesn't appear frightened. He doesn't appear lost. He looks like someone who knows exactly where he's going, but no one ever saw where that path ended. More than a decade later, Stephen's parents still speak of him in the present tense. His mother keeps his room tidy, as if he might walk in tomorrow. His father says he believes Steven may still be alive somewhere, possibly living under a new identity, maybe with memory loss, maybe trapped in circumstances beyond his control. To outsiders, that hope may sound fragile, but to parents of the missing, it's oxygen. Every December, they gather with candles and photos to mark another year without answers. They read the same scriptures Steven loved. They tell stories of his humor, his kindness, and his unfailing integrity, because until they know what happened, until someone, somewhere, comes forward, they refuse to let the silence have the last word. If there's one thing the disappearance of Steven Koecher has taught us, it's that a person can vanish in the most visible places, broad daylight, quiet neighborhoods, beneath the hum of ordinary life. It takes only a few minutes, a wrong turn, or a meeting with the wrong person. One moment, you're a man running errands on a Sunday morning. The next, you're a question that no one can answer. Steven's case remains open, his file still active with the Henderson Police Department. But as of today, no new evidence has surfaced. All that remains are the few seconds of footage and a family still waiting for him to walk back into the frame. To the Koecher family, your perseverance, faith, and courage continue to inspire those who know your story. For everyone watching, if you have any information about the disappearance of Steven Koecher, please reach out to Henderson Police or the National Center for Missing Adults. Even the smallest detail, a name, a memory, a sighting could finally bring closure to a family that's been searching for over 15 years. He left home for groceries and was never seen again. But his story deserves an ending, and someone out there may hold the key.